Boxing Day originated as a day when servants, tradespeople, and the poor were given gifts. The origin of the name has varied, with some believing it started when churches would leave alms boxes to collect donations for those less fortunate. Others say Boxing Day started when employers would give their employees boxes of gifts the day after Christmas because servants were required to work on Christmas Day. It has nothing to do with the sport of boxing. Since Boxing Day is a public holiday in the countries where it is celebrated, most people have the day off from work and school. While families usually gather together for meals, relax at home, and attend recreational events. Joining us now on the morning show as we look at the essence of Boxing Day from the Nigerian perspective amid the biting economic hardships is Dr. Sam Amadi, Arise News Analyst. Good morning, Dr. Sam. Merry Christmas to you in advance and happy Boxing Day, and thanks for joining us today.
Well,
Merry Christmas, thank you, and good morning.
Great Malabite. Merry Christmas.
Hey, Dr. Amadi, Merry Christmas, Malabatically.
Thank you. Well, it's Boxing Day. Who is boxing who? I mean, this is Christmas at a time of great dispossession. Not just in Nigeria, but also in other parts of the world. Even in Bethlehem, the manger is in ruins, to quote Bishop Matthew Azamkuka. What do you think is happening to our country? Even as President Tinubu says he remains committed, he's promising us hope, and he says he will give us more palliatives. But the Labour leader, Joe Ajaero, says, no, don't promise palliatives, concrete measures. And in his Christmas homily, Bishop Kuka listed specific things that the president needs to do to give concrete meaning to Christmas and after. Stop the killings, provide opportunities for the people, rid the public service of criminality. These are the kind of things that people are saying to the president, just as we've been discussing. Over 100 persons, Governor Mufwang of Plateau State told us, were killed during this season.
Well, Dr. Ruben, thank you very much. I think pessimism is not a virtue. So at a time like this, it's actually almost like a crime to be overtly pessimistic. So this is a time of joy, essentially giving of gift and like this. In South Africa, today is actually called the Goodwill's Day, goodwill. So people are supposed to express more of goodwill. But the fact is the fact that we are celebrating under a very dark cloud. I mean, 150-something people murdered in their villages. It's good that the governor came. Before now, the governor has been mooted. And part of the allegation or the assumption is that, look, the weapon of the sword of Damascus, called Supreme Court, is hanging over his head. And everybody is trying to be tactical because we don't even believe in, the mill of justice, even if it grinds slowly but surely, and grinding without, being over-influenced by power, by money, by entrenched interest. So here we are. On the day we're supposed to be sharing gifts, relaxing, Goodwill Day, in some part of the world, St. Stephen's Day, we're now really mourning, and not just mourning with some hope that, they say weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. But this is a weeping that is perennial. If you watch every Christmas period, Plateau or one of the Middle Belt communities will have this tale of grief and urges of bloodletting. And so we would like to be optimistic enter the new year with hope, like the printer has urged us. But then the auguries, if it were in the Roman days, the auguries do not tell a good story and do not give basis for optimism. Now, let's look at the issue that Ajaero raised. One of the ways we look at a country's prospect is their budget. Not just how big the budget is, but also what priorities they've identified. I don't know why it is very difficult for government to shut down unnecessary expenditure. People have been crying around the fact that the main street is suffering. The people, the small scale, the employed, unemployed, with inflation at around 28.20, you know how much the hunger is back and degree of starvation. So with this kind of situation, you expect some, change in terms of how government invests public revenue. But the budget tells a story that there's no lessons learned, and that maybe these we fear pause, we see as suffering, are not real. Because if they are real, they'll translate foremost to the budget. So that the budget does not give us a sense that government connects alignment. And talking about the origins of Boxing Day and the idea of charity, institutionalized charity. In welfare society, in liberal democracies, you have institutionalized charity, where the recognition that those who slip through the cracks of economic growth, and then there are institutionalized ways of responding to them. So our own charity today, there's no basis in which, there's no structure in which the government is actually, looking at those who are sleeping, and it's now an open, it's not just the creeks, it's now a big gap, a hole that people are, not just sleeping, but just pushing away. If you look at the poverty clock, you look at the pictorial, every second, more people are entering into poverty from Nigeria, and while more people are escaping a place like India, even Ethiopia, that generally we could consider ourselves richer and maybe poorer than us. But the poverty clock shows that more people exit poverty in Ethiopia, whereas more people enter into poverty in Nigeria. The World Bank estimates about 10 million people more in 2023 as a result of both the energy crisis, inflation of because of the removal of fuel subsidy, electricity tariffs, and all that. And of course, the drought, the environmental crisis, the killings, and how it affects agriculture. All those things, the many headwinds will create more poverty. And then the question is, how is government responding? So it's nice for government officials at state and federal level to reel out these platitudes and homilies, as it were. But the real thing is that maybe in 2024, they should really begin to deconstruct, governance. That's what we used to call demystifying governance. It's this idea of elected royals. It shouldn't be there. There's an item, for example, in the Ministry of Women Affairs. Women are the most hit by poverty, whether in terms of lack of prenatal care, postnatal, and all that. But 2.something billion for provision of refrigerator for Senate President's constituency. In the 10 billion or so for the Ministry of Women Affairs. So if you look at the budgets, everywhere you look at it, even those ministries that are frontline in driving fight against poverty, helping with improving human capital development, you look at the items, you see that basically the elites are chunking off resources for themselves and not really investing in where it matters for the people. So really, we're going to enter into 2024 with a lot of baggage of hope, but little facts on the ground suggesting that whether in terms of policy, whether in terms of the concern of your national budget, in terms of policies and laws that condition public expenditure in particular way, or even condition access to resources. Oxfam many years ago, published what is driving Nigeria's poverty and inequality. And they mentioned three things that stay there. One is budget. They say the budget doesn't ever focus on the people. And then there are no social protection, no rules, no laws. You are destroying labor laws that provide for minimum wage, that provide for security. So basically, we're exposing our people to the rough weathers that's uncharted and unmitigated. All
right, Dr. Amadi, thank you so much. Now, let me come back to Bishop Kuka's message. Side by side, the President's Christmas address yesterday. For the 8th point, he had talked about the fact that now all eyes on President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And I'd like to read a paragraph, just a little line from that statement. He says, you're on the driving seat now. Under your watch, Nigeria must turn the corner. Under your watch, we must end the ugly instrumentalization of religious, ethnic, or regional identities. You've had enough time to think of the answers to many questions that are crying for answers. And, prior to that, he had talked about the fact that this was a hard-fought win for the president. He had looked forward to this, this time of him being president of Nigeria. Hence, he should at least have a plan. The president, in his speech, empathized with Nigerians, talked about the fact that he understood that a lot of Nigerians were experiencing hardship on Christmas Day and that they were working towards providing palliatives. I'd like you to speak to that. Do you think his message was hopeful enough? And then side by side with Bishop Kukah's message, that the president has had enough time to plan for his time as president. How well do you think this has been demonstrated in some of the policies he's introduced, in some of his responses to the sufferings of the Nigerian people?
Well, see, Father Kukah, Bishop Kukah, I always call him Father. I told him he remained Father Kukah, so no offenses. Believes that Tinubu will come true. I've had personal conversations with him. I'm very close to Bishop Kukah. He believes in that Tinubu, three things. One, he thinks that, and I agree with him, that Tinubu's background, Tinubu, just like Jonathan, was the first president who knew something about the Niger Delta crisis and ought to have delivered, but unfortunately didn't quite deliver as expected. Tinubu is the first president who can claim to be part of a democratic struggle, prominent, played key role, and therefore has had processes to understand the Nigerian crisis, whether from the perspective of restructuring, whether from the perspective of social justice, religious killings and religious intolerance. The President Tinubu, more than any other person who was on that ballot, had a head start. He has been part of this. So Kukah's thinking is, look, let's support this president. He has experience. He has some experience he has gone through as a democratic struggle to be able to locate himself in the emerging Nigeria and see himself as somebody who can shift things strategically. And I share that view. The second point is that Kukah also perhaps thinks that Tinubu has the courage, and maybe, being a political gladiator and has succeeded in most of these fights, he carries the experience and the gung-ho, the confidence to be able to enter into this battle. Unfortunately, and this is important, I think how the president consulted his government is problematic. One of the shortfalls of political maestros is that they see politics more than they see governance. So they see opportunity for more political wins. They construct everyday daily experience and governance as opportunity to get politically better. At a point, the wind of politics now moves itself and refuses to be controlled. So if you look at appointments, terrible appointments in my view. I don't see why. Look at the combination of the Senate president, the presidency, the people, the chief of staff, the governor of FCT. One thing is common. These are political strongmen who put a lot on dominance and probably don't have that temper to really hunker down that the moment requires, build more, allow institutions to work and refine things. So I think probably he is saddled with less than optimal team to work with, and that's very important for presidency. If you study presidencies, potentials are there, but what defines actual delivery is the kind of people are in the room. Who is in the room? Graham Allison of Harvard University wrote a book about the Cuban crisis, and the real issue take away from that was that what mattered is who was in that room when those decisions were made. And so who is in the room of power is critical. That's the second point. I think the third point would be that Nigeria is in a point now that should be some kind of compromise on political power as against social realism. Get the job done. It might not pay off politically, but if you get the job done, maybe you have opportunity to be the savior. So what Kukah is saying basically is that, look, this is your moment. You are more prepared. Kukah has made that point clear that he thinks he's the most prepared in terms of exposure, experience, and desiring power. We've had people who didn't desire power. Now we have somebody who desired it, who put a team together, who has been putting in people in power. But the result has been dismal, in my view. Very, very, without pulling punches. But it can get better. This is just, maybe more than half a year of being in power. So he can still get the government back, but there must be trade-off. You have to give up this disposition towards political mastery and control and focus on getting the right people and cutting down on government as pork. Look, if you look at the budget, all the story around the budget is pork. It's about political heavyweights extracting resources they used to either fight for 2027. But if you settle down first to govern, then probably 2027 might be guaranteed easier. So the other point really, coming to those things Kuka laid down, is that, again, they have to deal with three factors. I always believe that the presidential system of government is all rise and fall around what they call the villa, the White House in the US, but we call it villa people, the chief of staff, the special advisors. If you look at what's going on with the report on the CBN, the stories around, it shows a weak presidency in terms of control, in terms of normative, conceptualization of governance and processes. So that tells you a story around staffing at the most critical place, which is the advisors and the chief of staff. You have to get them right. Not just loyalty is very important, but also competence and understanding of the work of the federal government. One of the things that Buhari did badly in 2015, I was in government then, and I was alarmed that they saw us as PDP people. And I was telling the VP people then, I said, look, when you win power, the whole government is yours. Take everybody together. You can't afford not to govern with so-called PDP 16 years, meant PDP monopoly of human capital. Most of these guys are not politicians. So you have to get the best guys, put them in. Some of the ministers are wobbling. Look at the power sector. Some are getting right, immigration. Some are getting right. But essentially, my view is that you have to get back to say, who are the policy guys here? What level of rigor and understanding of the work of the federal government? That's important. Civil service. And again, I think the beginning is the concept of honest governance, the concept of saying, look, we are here now to promote clean, efficient government. And so whatever decisions need to be taken, whoever needs to get on that job has to be somebody who will get that job done. So once the president signals that he's not ready to bury bodies, look at the report against Emefiele, for example. That report should go through a forensic, look at who did what, and trigger clear, transparent process for determination of guilt and punishment. Nobody is saved, nobody is victimized. So you begin to redefine governance, and it cascades down to different areas. Everybody knows that these are the things the president wants to deliver. I've gone to his manifesto, social market manifesto. Even the way they are governing 360 degrees away from their manifesto. If you look at the budget and place side by side with President Tinubu's manifesto when they run election, you see much divergence. So clearly, what that tells you is the lack of discipline which arises from too many political actors embedding their benefits in governance. So clarity, coherence, consistency, the three C's. You have to be clear about the concept of government you want to drive. You have to be coherent, meaning every side aligns. You cannot want to have clean, effective governance in one sector, and then you outsource lack of transparency, corruption, and inefficiency in another. Alignment, clarity, coherence. Everywhere is coherent. And then consistent. So with that, he can reinvent. But so far, I would argue that I think the government is drifting, not away from its original definition or description of direction in their manifesto. And generally, we were seeing signs of the same level of indiscipline that created the disaster that became Buhari administration. And I think these are redeemable. And I think that's the message from Father Bishop Kuka, that the moment is right now. You have the experience, you have the experience in terms of what you have gone through, and therefore you should be somebody who is prepared the one to drive it. But unfortunately, we're not seeing that.
Well, Bishop Kuka's Christmas homily, by the way, is titled Time to Reclaim Nigeria's Greatness. I don't know whether, we can reclaim Nigeria's greatness, because since 1985 that I got involved in this business of public commentary. We have been trying to reclaim Nigeria's greatness. I don't know whether Tinubu will be able to do it. Professor Soyinka visited the president at home here in Lagos. He said he presented to him a 7-point agenda. Tinubu himself talks about an 8-point agenda, which he calls renewed hope. Now, by this time next week, we'll be in a new year, 2024. Now, from your own perspective, what do you think should be the key priorities for 2024 for the Tinubu administration, bearing in mind that it cannot reclaim greatness in 1 year? What do you think it should do? Starting with the power sector, where you were once the Director General of the NERC, the Electricity Commission, Regulatory Commission.
Okay, thank you very much. I think what Tinubu should do for power sector is 3 things, and I've said it before. One is he should set up a real task force to see how we can improve some of the slippages. There are many things like shutdowns, power outages that are redeemable through proper project management. And the idea of a task force is not to push it in with propagandists or friends or people who probably have been sending CVs, but look out for yourself. Practical persons who understand and who probably their profile, they have said things that ought to be done. Let them come together to track almost on daily basis. That's short-term deliverable. The second, the medium to long term is that, look, the new Electricity Act has come in place, but there should be a federal government-based initiative to try to tease out clearly in terms of programmatic engagement what states can do. You have laid out a new document, a new constitutional framework for power sector, and a new Electricity Act. But there's so much uncertainty, so much crisscrossing issues. There should be that ability to translate it to doables, to enable states, energize them. I think the political economist Michael Mann calls it infrastructural power, the power to pass through, federal government pass through the regions and zones and local government to transmit the same level of coherence and efficiency. I think the federal government needs to do more to create that roadmap for states and private people to enter into this market and improve the efficiency and capacity. The Electricity Act needs to be operationalized, and you can't do that with 36 states chewing at divergent areas. You need to have, I believe in centralized government, but central coordination, and that's what we've seen from China or Taiwan. Anywhere I've seen economic development, that's a developmentalist state that is not Muslim people doing everything, but transmitting coherent message, aligning people, providing incentives, nudging, as Beverly would say, nudging states and local government to feed in. So that medium to long term. The other thing is that it's now time to review the electric power sector, Nigeria electric power policy. 2020 is a long time. The market has changed. The assumptions I've always maintained, we are too neoliberal, market fundamentalists. Things have changed. We've seen examples in Egypt and elsewhere how states have worked with private sector. So they need to review that and create a more implementable and efficient roadmap. So the 3 things, but the most important urgent one is now somebody must sit on top of this sector in the short term to drive up efficiency. Most of the outages are carelessness. People are not focused on their job. We saw that with Jonathan when the Bat Energy, with all the things they did wrong in terms of privatizing without planning very well. They did some things right in terms of project management. We have a modeling problem and a project management problem. But the project management problem can be fixed in the short to medium term, while in the medium to long term, we can fix the modeling. That means how the market should actually evolve in order to be efficient. The other thing I think is important, very important, is that the government should take seriously the issue of public trust. You see, public trust is important because every institutional coordination requires some degree of public trust. You can't run a government where people are divided, cynical. So a third world government or a developing country's government must be inspirational government because you want to change behavior at various levels. You want to change what people call economizing, people to now act more in line with economic efficiency, even at the private sector, even individual. So the government must be a believable government, credible. So Tinubu should try to find a way to reduce the division in the country, create more inclusion. Optics matters, symbolisms matter, messaging matter. They have to take control of the norms and the social capital and the narratives around development, because people can't really develop and put together if the narrative is not developmental oriented. That's important. And I think the third thing is rule of law. You see, the rule of law, Yar'Adua was very good. I like Yar'Adua's 3-point agenda. And when I look at it, it makes sense. You see, part of our economic crisis is a lack of rule of law. Social crisis, the killings everywhere. We need to restore rule of law. And rule of law requires some bit of articulation of what it means for different domain of social life and coherence in implementation. You could take on with this killing that has happened. Why can't we really ask critical questions? Why should this happen regularly? Who did not do what ought to do? And thirdly, finally, I would say the economy is critical. And growing the economy requires more effort, more policy, better policy, and bringing people together and creating that level. And the rule of law reinforces economic growth, because you can't have economic growth with level of crisis, level of corruption, and allegation of abuse of due process that we're having now.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your insights and thoughts on this Boxing Day here on Arise News, the morning show. Thank you, Dr. Sam Amadi. Look forward to having you again on the show.